Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in last week. This is the next episode of Dr. Deborah's Q&A, and I am so excited to be doing this in this climate of COVID-19 and being able to come and bring people topics and being able to talk about things that are so interesting and inspirational and just provide information to people about different things. So last week we had an amazing response on our topic of white privilege. And I think people just thought about it a different way. And Dr. Grissom did a great job of explaining what it was and how it is to walk around as a person of color in America. Not to say that other people don't walk around with preconceived notions about themselves, but she did such a great job and it made people really think about how to interact. Even my own husband was like, oh, I never thought about it that way. So thank you so much, Dr. Grisham. And thank you so much for tuning in. And if you ever have a question, just drop it below or contact me on Instagram or on Facebook. It is just Dr. Deborah Warner on both of those parts of social media, and I will be sure to answer it or make a show just for you. So with that said, let's go into what we're going to do this week. And oh, one thing I want to tell you, if you ever have a question, you don't want me to say your name, I will not do that, okay? But this week we have a question and the person didn't want their name said, so that's why I brought that up. And the question was, how do we solve sexual assault injustice? And I'm wondering if they brought this up because there was a story that came out about United Airlines, and there was these two men that were there. And they were on the airline, and there was a woman that was sitting next to them. And she started making sexual advances toward them and groping them and touching them. And they told her to stop. And she would not stop. And so they made several complaints to the people who worked on the airline. And after the third one, she was given a verbal warning. But it wasn't until the third one, and they both made complaints, that they did anything. And she grabbed their genitalia. They were pulling off their face mask because they were wearing the face mask due to COVID-19. It was amazing to me how this could happen in this day and age, right? And so I started thinking about something. What if the tables were turned? What if this was a woman, right? And what if this woman came up and said two men were groping her? How would she be seen? Would they have acted more quickly? Would they have believed them? I mean, there's something about men in our society when this happens that you say, hey, you can take care of yourself, or, you know, why are you making such a big deal out of it, right? Is there a double standard in that? And how would she be seen as someone who was, you know, not a woman of substance, right? And so I'm wondering how this would look. And so one of the things I did is I contacted an expert who's expert on sexual assault of women. And I wanted to see what he thought, because I'm a male trauma therapist, right? And either one, man or woman, this is gonna affect someone for a lifetime, right? So I'm wondering what he actually thinks about what happened during this time on this airline and how he thinks society is viewing this. And his name is Andrew Pari, and he is amazing. And so I'm gonna bring him in so that he can introduce himself. So hold on one second. Are you there?
I am.
Hey, okay, so I introduced the United Airlines thing really quickly, but I want you, before we get into that, to introduce yourself and what you do.
I'm Andrew Pari. I'm Executive Director and founder of Sexual Assault Awareness, which is a psychotherapy and training agency dedicated to ending shame, ending stigma, and ending sexualized violence for girls and women.
And where can people find you in case we forget to do that?
At my website, Sexual Assault Awareness, which is www.saawareness.com.
Awesome. And one of the things about Andrew is he's amazing, and he has taught me so much about women and about sexual violence and assault. And I thought he was like the perfect person to talk about this. Since I'm a male trauma therapist, it would be great to get two perspectives talking in one. So Andrew, the first thing I want to ask you is, what did you think when you saw this?
Actually, the first thought I had was how forward-thinking they are to be wearing masks on a flight a full month before. I didn't think a national emergency was already declared, but we hadn't gone into like lockdown on flight and travel and all of that. And I thought, these are two forward-thinking guys, which you don't usually associate with football players. But I thought that was pretty clever. Um, the other thought I had was this is kind of a Tuesday for most women. Like this is routine and typical for what women go through, and that it made national headlines because it was men. I think in part because it was men, in part because they're possibly well-known men. They didn't identify who the players are. I don't think we still know. But I think if they weren't NFL players, it wouldn't have gotten the attention, and definitely if they weren't men, it would not have gotten the level of attention.
Yeah, and that's what really was surprising to me, is because they're like, well, these are two guys. Why are they saying stop it, right? And that goes through people's heads, because of our stereotypes. Well, they're men, they can take care of themselves. It's just a woman and all that.
Right.
But what went through my head was, yeah, but this is happening. This woman was intoxicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
How is she being viewed now? Is she being vilified? Like, what is going on? How is society seeing her versus the men?
Right. Yeah, I think women get the same labels whichever side of the situation they're on. If they're the victim, they're a slut, they're a whore, she's asking for it, she's bringing it on. And I think the kinds of questions that would get asked would be, well, what was she wearing? What was she doing? Oh, she was drinking and on pills. And then the same on the other side, with this one being the aggressor or the predator in this case, is same thing. She's the slut, she's the whore, she's going after them, she's an aggressor. I don't think women win in that situation. I don't think there's a place at which they come out looking like the hero or the stud, as men are more often
looked at, right? And that's how that's how they're going to be viewing men, is like, well, why would you care? Like, why would you not want this to happen to you, right?
And there's a ton of stuff I was reading up on Twitter and on blog sites, and that's exactly what's happening. There's a well-known radio sports show host, Mike Francesa, out of New York, and he was saying things like, oh, these guys are going to be so embarrassed when they get back to the locker rooms and they talk to their teammates about what wusses they were. I can't believe they're suing over this. They're big, strong men. They should handle themselves. And those comments are getting repeated over and over again.
Yeah, and what people don't realize, regardless of gender, when you make comments like that, you're re-victimizing somebody, right? What you're doing is that you are, if they feel badly about it, you are re-traumatizing them to no one believes me. What I'm saying is not true.
And that was, when I first started thinking about this, a predator is a predator and a victim is a victim, regardless of sex, gender, straight, gay, trans. And so while I have a lot of thoughts on this about men versus women, I do think that anytime someone is brave enough, whether it's these guys or anyone else, brave enough to step forward and say, hey, something's happening, this is not okay, the first thing we have to do is listen to them and believe them and move forward from that premise.
Yes, and they don't have to tell you that about them. It's a privilege for them to tell you. These two guys standing up, I'm wondering in my mind, if they both hadn't witnessed it, if they would have said anything at all.
If
they both weren't experiencing it, would they have said anything at all?
No, if they were by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I think that shame factor, that embarrassment factor starts to skyrocket when you're alone, but when you have someone to back you up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you said something, a word, shame.
Mm-hmm.
Define that for me.
Define shame? Shame is when we feel bad about who we are as a person versus things that we've done, which is guilt. And so I think for sexual assault victims, male or female, shame is a major factor that comes up routinely. And I see that in my office. It's one of the primary things that I have to work through with the girls and women I work with, to be able to help them get to the other side and see what happened to them more objectively, because oftentimes they own the experience as being at fault, to blame, and internalize that. And that's what the shame is.
And do you think that shame is different for a man versus a woman?
I think there's different factors, because I think one of the key factors is women are socialized to not make a fuss, to be polite, to be respectful, to not say anything, and end up being more the targets of abuse because of that. Whereas I think men are socialized more to be the hero, be the actor in a given situation, be the hero of their story, to stand up, to speak out. And I do think that in a case like this, it made sense to me that these guys said something, because in addition to being men, they're also football players. So they are constantly trained to be more aggressive, to be more assertive, to take stand, to take action. And so it didn't surprise me as much, and I was really pleased that they did advocate for themselves and
Yeah.
stood up and said something. Whereas I think if it was even one woman or two women, maybe they talk amongst themselves, but probably would not have spoken up the way they did. And if they did speak up, I think it's much more likely that the women would have been even more dismissed and ignored.
So, yeah, because men are kind of told to fend for yourselves, like take
Right.
care of yourselves. And women are like, well, I need someone to protect me. And that's why you have all this girl power stuff going on, right? I just hashtagged in one of my pictures, woman power,
Nice.
And it's interesting because if men did that, it would be seen very differently in society, right? And here's two football players saying, I need help.
Right.
I wonder how the psyche was to that. And maybe that's why they were ignored so much.
Possibly, it's hard to say. They spoke up and they kept speaking up, and I don't think that's a woman's experience. I think a
No.
woman, even if she tries, like, hey, something's happening here, and she gets shut down, especially by another woman, because the flight attendant was a woman.
Yeah.
I think that's done for them. They'll just either they'll move themselves or hide in the bathroom or find some other way to deal with it. For the most part, there's certainly women who will, take action. But I think just in terms of male-female socialization, where these guys kept going, they complained a first time, a second time, a third time until something happened. And I do think, speaking from a position of male privilege, that's more of a male thing to keep pushing until we get the result that we're looking for.
Yeah, the assertiveness, because we're told not to be assertive. Do you think that there's anything else in our climate or anything else about the story that would have affected this? Because I just did a whole thing last week about white privilege and about different, the way people are perceived in the world. Do you think there's anything in there?
Yeah, absolutely. And a number of people are talking about this because she was a white woman. We don't know the identities of anybody, but we know that much. And one of the things that came out in the story is one of the men said, as an African-American male, I'm concerned about my image. Probably as an NFL player is also concerned about his image. And it didn't say this, but I think it was implied. If I had tried to take it into my own hands, if I had pushed her off of me or been rude to her or yelled at her, this story would have been spun in a very different way. I think because they were Black and she was white. And I think we have some very old racist attitudes in America about Black men, white women. And I think that story would have gotten spun differently. I think as difficult as it was for them, they did the right thing by persistently going to the available authority, who's the flight attendant in this case, and saying, this is not okay, this is not okay, do something about it until something, rather than trying to deal with it directly, because I don't think that would have gone well for them, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some trauma that has occurred in this. So in your experience, curiosity, and also for people to understand, break it down. Like, what can we do differently so we can see this differently? Not just for a man, for a woman, for anyone who's traumatized and assaulted in this way.
There's a campaign that I talk about and sponsor a lot, and it's called the Start by Believing campaign. And it's a very simple campaign, but it has a lot of good research. And it basically says, anytime a victim steps forward, boy, girl, man, woman, whatever the situation, start by believing them, listen to their experience, validate them. And the results of that are really impressive, because when we start from that place, people are much more likely to validate themselves and then step forward into reporting if that's what they want to do, seeking therapy or help if that's what they want to do, and be able to carry it forward. But they find in research that the first person they tell is often the most important, because if they don't feel heard or believed, then they often shut down and won't tell anyone again, sometimes for years or decades.
Yeah, or never,
Or never.
and especially if you just say, okay, hold on a second or whatever, let them flood. One thing I do, someone is disclosing to me, I always carry around gum and stuff in my pockets and a bottle of water, because I will cross my legs, I will sit there and I will be quiet. And being quiet is not an easy thing for me. And so
I can relate.
And so that's the best thing you can do, is give them that support and believe them. And then I always say, thank you. Thank you for telling me your story.
And thank you for saying that, because I just had that experience with one of my clients the other day, where they disclosed, and this is someone I've been seeing for a while, but they disclosed something they had never disclosed before. And I said, thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for sharing that with me. And they were surprised. They were like, what? Why are you thanking me? like, that was really hard for you to do. And I respect that. Oh, oh yeah, it was. And we, went on from there and we had this dialogue. But I think sometimes people are surprised when they're thanked for their vulnerability and for talking about things that are so hard to talk about.
Exactly. So sum it up. Anything else you want to add to this?
Probably so many things. I do think the whole women aren't believed and men are mocked. I think that's a key difference in a
Ooh,
story
that's
like
beautiful.
this. Because what struck me is no one's disbelieving these men. They're believing that it happened. They're making fun of them, but they're believing that it happened. Whereas a woman isn't even believed. She's lying. She has something to gain. She's going for the money, all of that kind of thing. Whereas these guys are being believed, like, oh, we know this happened, which, is kind of interesting to me that there's such a difference there. But it's well, these are big, tough guys. They should be able to handle themselves. They shouldn't have had to go to the flight attendant. They shouldn't be suing United for this. They should just suck it up. And, not an okay message.
Yeah, the suck it up, be a man
Right.
is the thing that is a current across every time a man discloses. Well, thank you so much, Andrew. And tell me again, where can we find you? You have a book coming out. Tell us all the stuff about you so people can continue a conversation with you.
Oh, the Me Too book. There's a Me Too book about psychotherapists and counselors who are speaking out about sexualized violence, including their own stories. And for the first time, I am telling my story, what happened to me when I was a teenager. And that just came out of PCCS Books in England. And I'm very proud that I was the only male and the only American invited, US person invited to write for the book. But it is out now, came out about 2 weeks ago. And my website is Sexual Assault Awareness. If you look up Sexual Assault Awareness and Andrew Pari, P-A-R-I, you'll find me, or saawareness.com.
Or you can contact me and I'll introduce you to Andrew. Thank you so much. I'm going to put you back in the waiting room. Don't go anywhere. And I'm going to close out the show. Huh?
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I love you bunches. So that was a very powerful interview. Thank you so much, Andrew, for that. And one of the things I want to say is in our media today, we have so many people talking about this. And I love that you talked about men are mocked, because there's a famous comedian that talked about a male who was sexually assaulted as a child and by a female teacher who's much older than him. And he said he was lucky. I really have a hard time with someone saying someone is lucky. He's not lucky. The rest of his life, he's going to have issues. He's going to have problems in relationships. He's not lucky. These guys, even though you think this is not a big deal, it's going to bother them. They're going to have traumatized symptoms that go with them for the rest of their lives because of something like this, and especially because society did not believe them. And because of all the things that are out there, because they're mocked. So no, there's no lucky that goes into this. This is affecting many, many factors of their life. So when people say that, stop and think. Stop and think what's coming out of your mouth and how it could hurt somebody else. Let's listen and love people. So I've already just did a soapbox on that. But I just want the media to hear that. So this next section is what I'd say to my BFF. The one thing I want to say to people is, why can't we just have manners? What comes out of your mouth, someone else is going to hear, they're going to read. Do you want them saying that about your child, about your family, or do you want them saying that about you? I'm not saying be polite, which we can be polite and care about each other, but it's really just about having good manners and caring about your fellow man, being a human being and treating people how you want to be treated. That's the first thought that comes to my mind. Now with that, I want to wrap all this up. Last week, we talked about white privilege. We talked about all of the things that we are feeling today in society, especially around gender, and especially around sexual assault, and about male victimization, and about male survivors out there. And we talked about all kinds of hard issues about how we want to show up and how we want to be seen and how we want other people to be seen when they disclose to us. So with that, please go out there and let's listen and love. And if you have any more questions for me to answer, please drop them below send it to me on Instagram and on Facebook, and I will get back to you. Let's think about how we treat each other and how we want to be treated in this world. Thank you so much.